Amy, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
I'm stoked to hang out. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, yeah. And we're logged on video, so I can already see how you are very artistic and creative by the scenery and your whole, look and feel. So it's really cool that you're so expressive. I can see that.
I am, and I think you might find this curious. I noticed that you're a fellow introvert,
Mm,
and I am as well. But I don't present as one. I present as the extroverted artist. But man, I love me a good pair of leggings and just staying in the house.
okay. All right. Interesting because I would assume that you are an extrovert. And I've heard that I have a good friend that said to me, she was like, Anna, I just don't get it. Like you like people and when I'm around you, you're so much fun. Like, how are you an introvert? And I'm like, I could just sit in a mountain and be totally fine by myself.
It doesn't mean you don't like people. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of how you recharge the best, right?
Yes. Yeah. Definitely recharge in quiet. So I'm really excited to have this conversation because I was listening to your podcast and I love your podcast. And there's so many topics we can dive in, but I think that standing up for yourself, right, is challenging. I'm just going to make the overgeneralization for most women, right? Like people pleasing. We want people to like us. We want to feel loved. We want that approval.
Sure.
So how does somebody, make change and feel like they're not going to disrupt, others, because I think when it comes to making change, it's disruptive to others a lot of the time, people that we love the most, and that holds us back.
That's right. That's right. Oh man, this probably can't be summed up in one little podcast, but I can definitely give you some places to look. So I think you're spot on when you're talking about this idea that people pleasing is a little bit more potent for women. And I would also argue that there are many people out there who don't identify as being a people pleaser necessarily, because the image of a people pleaser is somebody really quiet and meek and shy and just a yes man, or in California we would like to say totally, so it would be the totally girl, like totally I'll do that for you. And that's sort of the buy-in that people have is, well, I'm not a people pleaser. Like I don't let everybody walk all over me. But I would say, how invested are you in the opinions of others? That is people pleasing. So if you're constantly concerned what your boss thinks of you, or you're constantly concerned about what your clients think of you, if you're launching a new business, or if you are concerned about if you say, oh, I don't have an appointment available for you, and what people are going to think, then, that's people pleasing. I think we need to start opening our eyes to where we get really stuck here. But what's important to understand about this is that it's actually quite primitive. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one of our principal needs as humans, according to his theory, is the need for belonging, the need to belong to an organization, and in days of old, that meant a tribe. And what that meant was, if I'm not a part of some type of tribe or organization, body of people, that meant I die, right? That means I get eaten by a bear. That means I do not survive. It meant doom. So now, as we have evolved as creatures, we consciously know that if our boss doesn't like us, or if somebody dumps us, or we get a divorce, we consciously know that doesn't mean I'm going to die. But the subconscious belief is danger, danger. Oh my gosh, something's happening. You are not safe. So our instinct is to people please, is to go, how can I make you like me? How can I garner this love, this affection, this attraction, and force it? So another thing that I think you said that's really interesting is that there is collateral damage, because the reality is most people love the people-pleasing version of you because they get their way,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Your in-laws love the people-pleasing version of you that gets them their way, or whoever it might be in your world. So I think one of the biggest revelations for me was realizing that it was okay for me to be a disappointment to my parents because I wasn't a disappointment to me. and had to say to my mother verbatim, like, I do not need you to approve of me because I approve of me. So when we say, I'm afraid of hurting people, of course we are. Nobody wants to hurt people.
Yeah.
That may be a very real byproduct, because there are times when it is either you or me. Not always, but like a perfect example would be somebody, coming out of the closet, let's say, and wanting to tell their family and knowing that their family thinks it's an abomination and that they're, whatever it might be. So it is a very real choice of like, I either choose to make my family happy or I choose to make me happy. And I think that conundrum happens for many of us on a much smaller scale all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say there's so many subtle ways that that's happening, whether it's, at a restaurant where you're afraid to ask the waiter to change your meal because you don't like it, to, I think a lot of the time people stay in certain careers because that's what their parents expected them to, or that's what people around them approve of them. And, who would they be without that? And
Right.
relationships, I mean, that's just like there's so many layers to that, because like you said, we are wired for belonging, but it's so important in this day and age. And I've talked about this before, that when you become an adult, is that what actually is going to help you the most is to kind of not belong, to stand out, right? To find your thing, to be you. And I think there's this kind of challenge that we all have of how do we be ourselves when we've had all of this history with so many people around us,
That's right.
And what happens to those relationships? So when you had that experience with your mom, what happened to your relationship?
It's really fascinating. I'd love to actually share with you sort of the chronology of how I got to this point, because it was not overnight, let me tell you. So a bit of context, I grew up in an extremely conservative, born-again Christian family. My father had a master's in divinity and a doctorate in ministry, so he was definitely not messing around. Did missions work pretty much my entire childhood. And a lot of it was very, very heavily rooted in guilt and fear, as many organized religions are. And I don't mean to dispute what anybody believes. It was just very apparent to me that it didn't resonate with my spirit and didn't feel right to me in many ways. So a majority of my life, I kind of twisted and contorted and just kind of let my parents believe that I kind of subscribed to the same doctrine that they did, even though, as I got married and kind of went to college and was farther away from them, I was living a very dichotomous existence, not nearly what I was raised with. So I would kind of prep my husband when we would go see my family. I would say, okay, no gay rights, no Jon Stewart, no Howard Stern, no South Park, nothing, none of that. Can't talk about any of that. Don't cuss, don't drink, don't. And we were living sort of this facade. And it sort of came to a head, I guess I'll say, in 2007, my father passed away. And I had a really incredibly close connection with him. And I was sharing with you before we jumped on that my background is actually in makeup artistry, which I did for well over a decade. So I knew that when he passed away, there was two things that were extremely important to me. One was I was going to speak at his service, and two, I was going to do his makeup for the viewing. So that day, I felt like I was really checking off the box of kind of like the badass daughter, right? I am performing mortuary makeup on my father's deceased body. And then I speak to a crowd of hundreds about, he had just an incredible impact in his life. So it was a huge, huge service. Shared that, was dealing with all sorts of people, sharing with me religious things that didn't resonate with my spirit. I get back home to my mom's house, and she felt that it was pretty much the most opportune time to let me know that she feels like my father and her had failed as parents because none of her children were, quote, walking with the Lord. A bit of background on that too. My two younger brothers never went to school. They both had done jail time, trouble with the law. I was the antithesis of that. And yet we were all lumped together. It was kind of like, didn't matter anything you had done. You're still not subscribed to this religion, so therefore you're a disappointment.
Mm.
The only thing I could kind of muster in that moment was, you probably shouldn't say that to a child. I'm kind of thinking maybe I should just educate you on how to parent. And she said, well, that's just how I feel. And that really was quite the genesis of understanding that there was going to have to be a decision. And if it did come down to an ultimatum of, I either choose your happiness or I choose my happiness, then I'm going to choose mine. I'm choosing mine. And then the trajectory thereafter was really fascinating, because I went through a phase where I was just extremely combative and very adversarial. It was like the floodgates had opened, and now that I was like, this is who I am, now I'm going to just yell about it. Now I'm going to be fighting about it. And so I tried to bring up polarizing topics with my mom and get all worked up. And that really was kind of how I evolved into the main message that I have now, which is, you can absolutely be assertive. You can speak up for yourself, and you can do that with the utmost grace and kindness. And that's one of the fallacies. That's one of the bullshit notions that we buy into is, if I speak up for myself, then I'm being a bitch, or I'm being an asshole. I'm ill-intended in some way, or I'm purposely inflicting pain on somebody. Mm-hmm. I know that this will hurt them, and I'm choosing to cast hurt, which is a total misconception about your own behavior, because that's not what you're doing. You're choosing to honor you, that person, and you're ignoring their responsibility. So, to answer your question, I would say the nature of our relationship has not changed all that much, because it was disingenuous for so long, because I wasn't being as forthright, and so how that sort of changed then was, she would invite me to church, or would give me Christian books or things like that. And I would then have to speak up and say, I so appreciate that you thought of me. I really do. And I've expressed to you that this is not something that I am interested in. And my commitment to you is that I'll let you know if I ever am, but it's my humble request that you don't give me anything like this in the future. Because conversely, I don't give you books on astrology or, the things that feel of the devil to you. And I respect that. So I would just ask for the same in return. And that's how the conversations have gone now, after many, many, many years, many fights, many needing to clean up my mess. But that has been one of the most liberating choices in my life, was the decision that it is okay if you are disappointed in me, because I'm not. It is okay with me if you are going to carry the burden of my soul. Knock yourself out. I'm not concerned. So it was a real separation between what is my responsibility and what is somebody else's responsibility.
Was there some sadness there?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think that I think one of the things that we hit on first is anger, being a secondary emotion. That's what we tap into the fastest. And then there's usually something underneath that. For me, I tapped into that anger like crazy. But what was underneath that, the primary emotion, was disappointment. It was really this sadness that I'll never have sort of the free spirit hippie mom that's like love's everywhere and that your answers are in your own heart. Like I would love that. And like, here's a crystal reading and, all the hippie stuff that I love. But that's also not my responsibility to make her into that. And I also feel very strongly that I was born into the family that I needed to be born into to find my voice, right? To find my mission in this world and then to impart that to others. So there was definitely a span of time where I was like, how the hell did I get in this family? Like how? And then as I started living in my purpose and finding, like learning my lessons, which were to be vocal, to speak up for myself, then I kind of went, oh, that's why.
Yeah. It makes sense. I mean, especially, coming from my side in the work that I do, like I think a lot of our purpose is often rooted in the challenges that we've had, right? And the differences that we've had in our own lives and with our own self. And then helping other people have that freedom that we've found in healing and even just understanding, like, oh, I can be myself, and you can still have a relationship with your mom. It doesn't mean that you need to cut her off, right?
No.
But that it's this ever evolving work in progress, and you're probably always learning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell you too, like it wasn't until I had a moment very clearly I think it was in 2016, when everything was happening with the elections, and shocker, we were on different sides. And there was like some guilt being hurled at me. Like it just breaks my heart, that you would, be feeling this way, or that is where you're going. And it was the first time that my response was autopilot in a positive way,
Yeah.
where I could very clearly see that she was trying to inflict guilt, and I did not accept it. And I just said, I just want you to know that really does go both ways, that I'm equally as disappointed. And I also know that that's completely your freedom and your right. And if I want to advocate for my cause, I can't be a name caller,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't be acrimonious and biting. So I hope that we can have really elevated conversations about this. So, and not everybody can reciprocate a delivery like that. Not everybody is up for that. But
Yeah. It takes time though. That takes time.
Oh, it does. Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like I used to just yell and scream.
Yeah.
What do we do?
I think that's the initial reaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We usually either run away, we people please, or we are fighting and yelling and screaming, and we're getting our point across, but not in a way that we can be heard. So it's interesting too, because I have a metaphor that I use specifically for guilt. And it's this idea that, you are essentially a home or a house, and you have all these intricacies and these different components of your, house and your rooms and all of that. But that's you, right? And then outside of you, people can leave like a pile of shit, let's say, on your porch. And that's like somebody criticizing you, casting guilt on you, telling you you're not good enough, anything that feels like a negative emotion to you. And then you've got that choice. Like, am I either going to pull that shit into my house and take it on? Or am I going to say, oh no, I'm not currently accepting any piles of shit. Thank you. Now, conversely, somebody could leave a gorgeous gift on your porch of your house. And that's kind of like accolades, honors, commendations, compliments. And then you get to be at choice, like, oh, no, I do want to bring that gift into my house. That's an addition. I like that. And it's catering to sort of how you feel. But do not get it twisted. It does not change the quality of the house. Neither one of those things change the intrinsic worth or your value as a human. It's just some experiences in life suck and some experiences in life are euphoric. And we get that twisted a lot of times. We think if I'm experiencing sadness, let's say from a rejection, then that must mean I'm not lovable or I'm not enough or I'm not capable, instead of saying this situation sucks. I don't suck.
Mm-hmm.
That's very hard to untangle,
Yeah.
and it is essentially what I do a lot.
Yeah. It's like sorting beliefs, right? Like,
Sure.
oh, mom, those are your beliefs, but they're not mine, right? Because a lot of the time we ingest other people's beliefs around us and
Right.
society, right? And it's really starting to sort beliefs. And also if something happens, it doesn't, not to give it meaning about you. Is that what you're saying?
That is right. That's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
And, one of my favorite things to do is just to ask the question in those situations. What am I making up? What am I making up? I'm making up that mom's truth needs to be my truth. Or I'm making up that if I didn't land this client, that I'm never going to have my business take off.
Yeah.
we make up these catastrophized ideas about what things mean. And most of the time, what's really happening is we're just experiencing an emotion that's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. So I want to ask you more, because I think one of the biggest things that holds us back is what other people think,
Yeah.
right? Which is actually our thought, right? So it's like this idea of like, what if we fail? What will other people think? Or, what if things don't go the way that I want them to? What will other people think? Or, how what's your best strategies for helping somebody not let what other people think, kind of, because I think so many ways we let that rule us, and we make decisions based on what we think other people are going to think.
That's right. That's right.
It's very trapping.
Yeah, I think it really, really depends on what situation you're in and how intimately involved you are with somebody else. So, for example, having a really tough conversation with somebody you're married to is probably going to feel very different than saying no to somebody who's outside of a supermarket wanting you to buy stuff.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a different emotional intensity around it. So one of the things that I love to let people know is allow yourself the understanding that I am allowed to be attached to these people, but I'm not responsible for these people. So I think it's irrational for me to think that I'm going to get to a point where I don't give a shit what my husband thinks, or I don't care what my best friend wants to share with me, right? It's like, no. I'm intimately involved with these people. Of course I care what they think. It's not that we are going to stop caring what other people think. It's that it's not the final say in our own integrity and our own decision-making process. So what I like to do is look at almost a hierarchy of, like, these are the people at the very top whose opinion I highly, highly regard. And that's sort of my soul tribe, a small circle of people that I consider wise counsel. And I do care what they think. And then it starts to become less and less and less down the totem pole, so to speak. So if it is, some random person who wants to share thoughts with me on my website, who I have no idea who they are, some stranger, I can release that so much faster than if it's, my partner, my best friend, or my brother, something like that. So one of the things that I think is really important is it really depends what the major opposition is. Like, if you're afraid of failing and it gets tricky, because there's situations where we're the ones who are the most hard on ourselves. That tends to be really common for people who identify as a perfectionist or recovering perfectionist, or a perfectionist in remission. And so for those people, they tend to be their worst critic. It's not necessarily that the boss is coming down on you, or that your clients are coming down on you, or it's usually you're coming down on you. So the answer is different. And that becomes, what have I made their approval mean? Usually it's something like, their approval means I'll be happy, or then I'll be enough, or then I'll be valuable. So then it becomes like, how do I start finding that intrinsic value outside of my accomplishments? Now, there's a whole other body of people who actually have individuals in their life who are saying, you're not good enough, or I need you to do this or that or the other, or family members who are criticizing your parenting. That's a very different issue, because now it's about fear of actually speaking up and advocating for yourself. So it's two kind of different avenues that we would take. And sometimes it's hybrid.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. And, I love what you're saying here. And I agree with what you're saying as well. I also think that it's really learning yourself a lot, right? Is, that self-awareness piece, I think, is totally underrated. And we put so much emphasis on looking outside, or trying to make it look good on the outside versus really checking in and pausing and really understanding, how do I really feel about this?
Right. Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
And what's challenging about that, and I don't know if you've come across this a lot with your clients, is and largely with women, that they've lived a life catering to everybody else's wants, opinions, and needs, that they don't even know what they like. They
yeah.
don't even know what I care about and what matters to me. And that is why podcasts like this, personal development books, working with coaches, working with therapists, I know you went through a phase like that where you just, let me grow, let me learn. And that's what changes things. But we don't do that. We go, oh, everything will be fine as soon as my partner gets her shit together or his shit together. Everything will be fine as soon as I get this new job. Everything will be fine as soon as I have a baby. And it's all those external things. And we forget that we have to do that internal work, or none of it will ever be fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's just like, where I like to start is just by paying attention to, when do you feel, to go back to the joy junkie, when do you feel that little spark of joy? To pay attention to that, right? That's giving you information, right? To pay attention to, when does your energy dip? Maybe you just had a conversation with somebody and you walk away and you're like, that I don't feel so good,
That's
to really start to investigate internally what's going on there that's making you feel certain things, and to be curious about it. And it does help to have somebody kind of help you as well.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think something that you're pointing to here is unbelievably important. It's something I get worked up about, and that's just emotional intelligence. Understanding what you are feeling. Most of the time, when we feel, quote, bad, which by the way is not a feeling, it's not an emotion. When we feel something uncomfortable, we usually collapse a story. Like I was saying earlier, like we make it mean I'm not lovable, I'm never going to be successful, whatever. Instead of going, oh, my emotions are just messaging. They're just messaging, whether they're positive or negative. So if I'm feeling a lot of disconnection, or I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling angry, shameful, embarrassed, joyful, excited, blissful, passionate, that is messaging. It's a place to go, Amy, pay attention, pay attention. Shame is popping up here. Dig underneath it and look at like, what happened here? What belief would I have to be attached to feel this shame?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just going, oh, I feel like shit. Oh, I hate myself. I'm awful. And we just anchor into that emotion instead of going, no, it's just telling me something. The same way, if you have an achy knee or you start breaking out, your body is just like, hey, pay attention. You can't eat gluten. Hey, pay attention. Knock it off with the dairy. Hey, I need you to go get a dental visit. It's the same thing with emotional pain.
Yeah. Do you have a structure for people to begin, kind of having these conversations that are uncomfortable? I know there's like, something like an I message, right? Where you start with, I feel, and then you explain to the other person. Do you offer people like these really tactical solutions in terms of how to actually have a conversation that's uncomfortable?
I do. Actually, there's a whole week that I spend on it in sort of my signature program that I do, where it's basically like a 7-step process of having really effective, tough communication or conversations. And so the first thing though that I would say is, I think that what you have to determine first is this conversation one that is a boundary, like a real definitive line, where it's not necessarily up for negotiation. Something like let's say telling your in-laws to please stop feeding your child sugary foods when they watch them, right? Like it's a very definitive line. So when you have a conversation like that, it's very different than the one that's of collaborative effort versus something like talking with your partner about your sex life. And they're going to have issues that they want rectified, and you're going to have issues you want, and both parties really matter in the dynamic. So I consider those separate almost. Like one's a tough conversation. They're both tough, but one is more of a hard conversation. One's a boundary. So boundaries tend to be a little bit easier just because you can be very like, here's the line in the sand. But I don't necessarily say I feel as much as I'll say, here's how that landed, or here's how I interpreted that. When you said this, here's what I heard. Because I think a lot of times what happens inside of any relationship is there's the facts of what was said, the actual verbatim facts, and then there's what we implied, what we made that mean, what we assumed. So I'm trying to distill down like what would be some really helpful steps as far as tough conversation. A couple of tips that I can throw out there. One is to ask for the time to talk, and to not say, we need to talk. So if it's an in-law, if it's your partner, if it's a business partner, to say, hey, I've got a couple things I'd love to run by you. Do you have 30, 40 minutes in the near future? Or I'd really love to get your thoughts on stuff, something that's been coming up for me lately. Something like that, where you're genuinely interested in that other person. Because a lot of times when we get all geared up and like, okay, I'm ready to have this conversation, your partner just got yelled at by their boss, or, you know, your mother-in-law just got done dealing with your father-in-law, which is, you know, or whatever. So being really mindful that they might not be able to receive that conversation at the time. Mm-hmm. So that's the first, ask for the time to talk. Second is what they call in psychology kind of a soft startup, you know, like it might even be John Gottman who coined that phrase of entering into the conversation. I say owning your shit, owning your piece in the matter. So most of the time, spoiler alert, your piece in the matter is that you have not been as clear about what the issue is for you, and or you haven't said it with kindness. Maybe you've screamed and yelled, maybe you've been passive aggressive, but you have not said like directly to your husband, like, I don't know if I've been super clear about this, and that is really on me. I realize that I've been getting resentful, and it's incredibly unfair to you for you to not know what's been going on with me. And so I'm really hoping that I can share this with you. And the truth is that, you know, I do feel a really strong biological pull. I do want to start to have a family sooner than later. And I feel like I've been making it like it's not a big deal, and I haven't been as forthright. You know, owning your shit. You're not saying I'm apologizing for wanting a baby. You're saying I'm apologizing for the dynamic that I haven't been honest with you about how important this is to me, or how important it is, mother-in-law, to not feed my child, you know, this type of food. So softly starting off, you know, going into there saying like, hey, you know, and that takes vulnerability. And that is probably one of the hardest pieces for people, because it's easy to go in there, walls up, guns blazing. Mm-hmm. Like, listen, here's what's not going to work anymore, blah, 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 blah. But when you embody vulnerability like that, you are far more likely to evoke it from the other person.
Yeah.
You will be more likely to mirror that. And same thing if you go with, you know, guns blazing, you're more likely to elicit a defense mechanism from the other person.
Yeah.
The other piece I'll say is being very, very explicit or quantifiable about what you are asking for. Now, there might be situations like with the mother-in-law example where you are very crystal clear. Here is what I'm requesting, that you no longer feed my child anything with these ingredients, right? It's very clear. In a relationship, it might be something like, let's say you want to go back to school and you're really nervous what your partner's going to say about it. So you're bringing it to her and you're telling her like, here's what I want to do. And you're so afraid of what she's going to say. And so you say something like, what you're requesting, what you're very specifically requesting in that instance is, babe, I just need you to hear me out. You know, I don't know what I want to do with this yet. And my request is just, I have had so many emotions around this, and it would just mean the world to me if you just listen to me air this all out. I don't have any solutions. But I know I need to share this with you because it matters. Other times it might be a very, you know, like let's say it's another relationship scenario. So instead of saying something like, I just really need you to be more romantic, Okay, well, what the hell does that mean? Does that
Yeah.
mean initiate sex more? Does that mean dates? Does that mean taking on part of the bills? Like, what does romance mean to you? So you have to be very explicit, saying exactly what you want and delivering it with kindness. Another piece of that is to really, really watch tone and inflection. I find that a lot of people will disregard their poor delivery because their partner, they think, has done a worse instance or has behaved in it. You didn't pick up our kid when you were supposed to pick up our kid, or you dropped the ball on this client or whatever. And so we feel validated in yelling and screaming or being passive aggressive or throwing guilt. No. You are always 100% responsible for your delivery, always, regardless of how egregious the other person is being. And despite how hard that is sometimes to rein in your delivery, that is when you are most likely to get what you want, because the other person can actually hear you.
Yeah.
Nobody can hear you when you're screaming like a banshee out of hell,
Yeah. Well, people don't want to listen, right? They're not as open and receptive to hearing what you have to say when they feel like, they're being attacked and their defenses go up, right?
You
But
get,
I want to
yeah.
ask you about just like being human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are going to be times where we don't mean to get angry, but something triggers us, and
Yeah.
the first thing that comes out is anger. And I'm also speaking from experience over here.
Yep.
And something that I am practicing myself and learning is, I love the communication tips because I think they're just so essential for health and happiness and relationships and life that we're often not taught, right? And I think a lot of problems boil down to communication.
Yeah.
But then also, we're human and we're going to have emotions, and sometimes we're going to get caught off guard, and we're going to get angry and not mean to, right? Until we've kind of built up enough awareness over, why did I get angry about that? Similar to what you explained with your mom.
Yeah.
What I have found personally, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is how quickly can I forgive? How quickly can I recover from, what? I realize, owning my side of the street, like, I realized I just yelled at you and that wasn't how I wanted to say that. What I was really trying to say was X, Y, and Z, and apologizing for my side of the street.
Yes.
What's your take on, like, because I've made it almost like a little bit of like a game for myself, of like, when something does happen that I was unconscious in and just kind of a splatter of a human being, how quickly can I recover is really what I'm asking myself, right? Like, how quickly can I let go and not hold on to resentment or forgive?
I think the answer to that is as long as it takes, and do we want to expedite it? Sure. Like, I would love to move on really quickly, but I think everybody processes emotions differently. So if you are so let's talk practically. If you are in, that tough conversation, you start raising your voice, I highly suggest that the two of you have an understanding of, if this gets too heated, let's take a break.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's a type of relationship or a conversation that both of you know, we could have some really intense feelings, set that up from the get-go of, I don't want to yell at you. I don't want to go to blows on this. Can we make sort of an agreement that if either one of us feel like the other is getting too combative, maybe we do like a timeout sign with our hands, and so you can have an agreement, right? That's if you can get ahead of it. If you can't get ahead of it and you've kind of unleashed the beast, so to speak, you stop yourself as soon as you can, right? And call yourself out and like, I need a timeout. And I've done that before with my husband, where I'm like, I can't look at your face. I'm going to go off on you. Like, I need a good 2 hours.
Yeah.
So call the timeout.
Yeah.
And then you own your shit, you guys.
Yeah.
You own your shit. And I like to call this declaring the do-over, where you decide, here's how I would want to handle myself differently next time. And then you go clean up your mess for your delivery, not for how you feel. So you go back and you say, it is so unacceptable that I raised my voice like that. You did not deserve that. In fact, I've had to do that with my mom, during that very combative phase. And that's exactly what I did. I told her, I said, I still feel very strongly about the stuff that we talked about. I haven't changed my stance, but it was not okay that I delivered it to you in that way. So you go clean up your delivery. You do not have to apologize for how you view the issue, like wanting sex more often, or you don't have to apologize for that, or for no high fructose corn syrup at your in-laws' house. That's not what I'm saying. You apologize for your delivery. And so I just call it declaring the do-over. And like, what do I need to clean up? How do I want to handle it differently next time?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Question about your career, totally switching gears here. You went from being a makeup artist to a life coach. And it would seem like, oh, you're following your passion, your creativity, your artistry as a makeup artist. But how did you know that that wasn't your life's work, so to speak?
Well, I think, first of all, I think we're way too versatile as humans to have just one passion. And second of all, I think that those ebb and flow in the different seasons of our life. And I think it is something of, for me, it's like I'm passionate about it, like die hard, until I'm not. Until there's a reason for me not to be passionate about it anymore. And I think that's okay. So, but I did go through a very specific mourning phase where I thought I was going to keep climbing up the company. I was a corporate trainer for a prestige makeup brand, and I traveled and had an assistant and a company, all the fancy big girl job stuff. And I just got to a point where I was really falling out of love with the craft. I had gotten way too involved in the corporate aspect of it, and really fell out of love with the company, and it marred the artistic element for me in a lot of ways. And so I kind of came to this realization that what was the most important thing to me was creativity and expression, but it didn't have to be through a makeup artistry medium anymore. So I knew that it was time to create a change, but it did take me about 3 years to figure out what does that look like, and I was able to kind of reverse engineer it a little bit. And I kind of said, okay, of the things that I'm doing now, what are the things that I love and I know need to be present? And then what are the things that I do not want? And so I started to tally this inventory, and I thought, okay, I want to be my own boss. I do not want to have to work on holidays and weekends anymore. I need to be doing something creative. There needs to be a creative element. I need to create some kind of impact in the world. I don't want to be involved in direct sales. There was all sorts of things I started computing and compiling. And I also knew that as a trainer and an artist and delivering information, I wanted to be speaking, I wanted to be educating, but I wanted to be teaching a different message. I just didn't know what the message was. So I took a decent amount of time to kind of check in with that and look at that. But I definitely had to go through a mourning phase where I went, oh, okay, this is not going to be where I continue going with my life and my career. And I remember writing in my journal, I could, and I had these little makeup stickers, like lipstick and powders and things like that. And I used them in my journal, and I said, I can absolutely love, and I put all my little stickers in there, lipstick and powder and makeup, and I don't have to do it as a profession anymore. And so it was realizing I love artistry and I love makeup, but it's going to act in a different role in my life now. And having that freedom to quit on something that was no longer fulfilling me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I mean, I know what that's like from a tennis perspective when I played tennis for so many years. And, there was a lot that I loved about it and I was good at it, but that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And learning to separate sometimes what are your passions and your hobbies versus what do you want to do for your work.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Anna, did you have a situation where because you were so good at it, people said, why are you stop teaching? Why?
Oh, yeah.
But you're so good. But talk about people pleasing, right?
Yeah, that was really hard for me. Especially when I had put in so much time, energy, and effort. I'm sure you can, relate and have empathy for the fact that you put in so much time, energy, and effort into your makeup craft, right? It's like you spend so much time and energy, and then you feel like you're going to walk away from it, you know, and everybody around you like also sees you that way, right? Like, you know, it becomes kind of part of your identity, and it still is a part of my identity. You know, it just, you know, and I still get, you don't play tennis anymore. And I'm like, well, every once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, it wasn't really where my heart was, you
Yeah.
know, and it was hard to walk away. And I was definitely scared that I was going to disappoint people. But there comes a moment where you're, like you said, you choose, you know, either you're going to make yourself happy, you know,
Yeah.
or, you know, what's more important. And it's not that other people aren't important. It's just that you get so sick of living with yourself, I think.
Well, you're also not living passionately, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because people would say that to me too when I resigned out of these, higher profile positions. They were like, "What? But you're so good at it." And I would go, "I know, I am." I'd be like, "I totally agree with you, but I don't like it. I do, and it's the same way, like, I think I'd be an amazing parent. I really do. I have zero interest in being a mom, you know?
Mhm.
So you make those choices for you, for your personal fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
Would say the same thing. "Oh, you'd be an amazing mom." And I'm like, "I know. And I don't want that."
Yeah,
You
totally.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's like irrelevant. Doesn't matter. I'm good
yeah.
at a lot.
Yeah, and it's like, thank you for your compliment. I appreciate it, but it's not what I want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, that can be challenging though, because even, you know, when I look at you, I'm like, ooh, could she do my makeup?
I'd have to come out of retirement.
Because you can see that you're very good at it, you know.
Oh,
Yeah, I can see that that's definitely a skill set, but you're also very good at, you know, transformation clearly.
oh, thank you.
And it's been a joy being with you.
Oh,
Um, any last words or actions or something, like a question that maybe somebody could think about for themselves?
yeah, I would say, because one of the places to find where you tend to people please or where you're twisting your behavior is typically the things you complain about the most or the people you complain about the most. So I would take a little inventory in your life and look at, are there situations or persons that I'm chronically complaining about that I have not taken any action on? It's usually, your boss who you talk so much shit about to your partner, but you never actually go have a tough conversation with your boss. So I've started to kind of adopt this mantra of I refuse to bitch and complain about things that I'm not willing to take action on.
Mm.
So I would start there with an inventory and just look at, who are these people that I do need to start amplifying my voice with, or where do I silence myself a little bit? And one of the best places to look is, what do you complain about? And then the addendum to that I would say is to really be gentle with yourself. The woman that you hear right now speaking to you is the same one who cowered 10 years ago behind her husband, trying to not be who she really was in front of her parents. And then the one who exploded and screamed and yelled at her mom. So it's been many, many years in the making. So look for the baby steps. Look for steps. It's about that compound effect over time. It's not the clouds parting. That's not how transformation works. It's slow, incremental changes over time. So be
Yeah.
gentle.
Yeah, I love that. I do think that we can have this image of transformation, like we, you know, like it's like this breakthrough, and it's not. It's really a series of very small steps, and I think it's really important to understand that we're ever evolving, right? So it never ends, and to be gentle with yourself in the process is very important. So thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a blast.